When I first discovered goth in primary school, I did what many quote-unquote baby baths do. I tried to fit into what I thought was the correct goth look. For a time, I dressed in traditional goth attire, adhering to the familiar looks of what we usually see in those conformity-embracing goth compilations that usually presented what we now call copy and paste modern trad goths. But even then, of course, I felt like I was performing a role, trying to meet an unspoken standard to avoid being labeled a for fuck's sake poser. The pressure to conform within a subculture that itself resists conformity was exhausting. Yet now I realize I wasn't expressing myself, I was policing myself to fit into a label that has never fit me. So, looking back, I realized that this early experience revealed a deeper truth about goth. It's not about fitting into a single mold or aesthetic, even though many do subconsciously make it look like that. Goth is about resisting that status quo. Through music, literature, fashion, hell, even philosophy. By embracing the taboo, the macabre, the shockingly rebellious, it's a counterculture that challenges mainstream norms at every turn you look. Yet, this is the complexity that is often misunderstood. Recently, after sharing a reel explaining that surely goth has no one correct look, yet a clean girl that listens to some mainstream darkwave and near modern post-punk will never be goth if she never embraces this underground resistance that goth has always been. I was accused of gatekeeping, of trying to police who can and cannot be goth, but my message was quite the opposite. I argued that goth's essence lies in its resistance through expression, and that expression must challenge the mainstream in some way. If someone only listens to popular goth bands but never visually or conceptually disrupts the status quo, I argued, can they truly embody the rebellious spirit if the core of goth is literally rooted in the embrace of the taboo to truly resist the status quo? So welcome to my video essay, Expression as a Resistance Against the Status Quo, an essay on the goth subculture, and this essay will be my attempt to explore that question more deeply. I want to show how goth's varied expressions, whether through music, fashion, literature, or even activism, are united by their role of resistance against the status quo. Through embracing what society fears and silences, we, goths, are forced to make people confront why those taboos exist in the first place. I hope that because of this, goth becomes more than a style or a playlist in your eyes, and through this exploration, I hope you realize how powerful of cultural defiance goth has always been. Goth is often still misunderstood as just a style, a specific look that involves black clothes, pale makeup, and a certain attitude, I guess. That's just a character the media has taught us, which, to be honest, many of these features are rooted in Eurocentric perceptions of goth, even white supremacists. The pale skin, blonde, straight hair, how could this ever be a correct portrayal of this culture so rooted in diversity? At its core, goth has always been subculture rooted in resistance. It's about pushing back against the mainstream norms by embracing what society tends to fear or ignore, the taboo, the macabre, and the melancholy. This resistance isn't limited to fashion or music alone. As you've hopefully figured, goth is a complex culture that includes diverse musical styles, from the haunting sense of darkwave to the raw edge of death rock and the futuristic drive of cybergoth. It isn't just about the early goth rock or the root of it, post-punk. It also thrives in literature, art, and philosophy, all of which explore themes of alienation, mortality, and existential questioning. Importantly, goth refuses to be boxed into a single definition of look. If there's someone as a trad goth, death rocker, cyber goth, null goth, earthy goth, and so on, these are all expressions within the same goth movement. Each culture bringing their own flavor, they all share a common thread, a deliberate rejection of the status quo. This rejection is not about mindless rebellion or shock for shock's sake. Instead, it's a thoughtful confrontation with the things society labels as wrong or scary. Goth asks us why certain topics, death, mental illness, unconventional spirituality, are taboo, and it challenges the systems that enforce these silences, whether they be mainstream media-influenced, stupid fucking politicians, or religious institutions. So when someone says I sound like I'm saying goth has a certain look, we're missing the bigger picture. Hell, I say even the whole point. Goth is about why we express ourselves in a certain way, not just how we look. The culture of questioning, pushing boundaries, and finding beauty and meaning in what mainstream society often rejects. One of the most visible ways goth resists the status quo is through aesthetics, because that's how you'll notice it's one of us, not just a normie outside of goth-centered events, literally just walking around doing our daily errands. Fashion, makeup, and style aren't just about looking a certain way. No, they're deliberate acts of rebellion. The shock value, the taboo-breaking nature of goth aesthetics challenge societal norms around beauty, conformity, and what is considered acceptable. Wearing black lipstick, heavy eyeliner, or unconventional clothing isn't just simply a fashion choice. It has always been a statement whether you like it or not. Visual expressions disrupt the smooth flow of mainstream culture by forcing people to confront their discomfort with darkness, depth, or difference. But of course, expression in goth isn't about copying a template. It's about using aesthetics to communicate individuality and resistance. That's why goth looks very widely, from the vintage elegance of styles like romantic goth to the neon futurism of cyber goth or the gritty punk edge of death rock. Each style pushes boundaries in its own way, but all share the common goal of shaking up the status quo, no matter what way it pushes this boundary towards. This is why, in my opinion, quote-unquote clean girls, as I mentioned, who listen to mainstream goth music but never dress or express themselves in a way that challenges norms, don't embody the core of goth's spirit. Goth is not just a playlist or label, what the fuck, it's a lived expression of dissent. If expression doesn't disrupt or question societal expectations, it loses the whole rebellious core that defines goth. Even though aesthetics aren't the main point, the way you'll be at least as alternative has never been out of the question. Ultimately, any aesthetics goth are a form of resistance that makes visible what society often tries to hide or ignore. Through bold makeup and conventional fashion and unapologetic self-expression, goth forces you to begin a conversation about why certain ideas and experiences are taboo, and in doing so, it unsettles the status quo, as it always is meant to do. Even though we've mainly talked about looks here, goth's resistance to the status quo truly extends far beyond aesthetics. Music, literature, philosophy form the deeper layers of the subculture's rebellion, each adding complexity and depth to its challenge of mainstream norms. Musically, goth has always embraced themes that mainstream culture often avoids: death, despair, alienation, and existential angst. Goth music creates a space where the macabre and the melancholic are not only accepted, but in some ways celebrated or at least truly highlighted. This landscape is a form of resistance in itself, offering an alternative narrative to the upbeat sounds of dominating pop culture. Literature and art play a similar role. Goth draws heavily from gothic fiction, horror, and poetry to explore the darkest side of human experience. Writers like Edgar Allan Poe or Mary Shelley, sorry I don't have Frankenstein on me, and other contemporary authors in the Gothic tradition challenge readers to confront uncomfortable truths about morality, madness, and societal repression. This literary heritage enriches Goth's philosophical core, encouraging introspection and questioning of accepted values. Philosophically, Goth often embraces existential themes and alternative spiritualities that reject mainstream dogma, whether through a fascination with death, cult practices, or a critical stance toward organized religion. Goth philosophy encourages questioning the foundations of the status quo. It's also worth comparing Goth to punk here. While punk confronts the status quo with raw, direct political anger, Goth's rebellion is often subtler and at least more introspective. Goth invites us to explore the shadows, both personal, societal, and to find strength in what mainstream culture fears or ignores. Other subcultures resist, but Goth does so through embracing the taboo and the macabre as a means to unsettle and provoke thought. Goth, of course, is a layered form of resistance, one that challenges not only what we see on the surface, but also the deeper cultural narratives that shape our understanding of life, death, and identity. It explores the shadows and subtly but clearly does ask the question of why we even made such things taboo. We simply have to realize Goth's embrace of taboo and the macabre is more than just shock. It forces society to confront why these topics are silenced, feared. By openly engaging with themes like death, mental health, and existential dread, Goth challenges the cultural norms that keep these subjects off limits. This conversation that Goth likes to spice into the daily disrupts the comfortable narrative that mainstream society prefers. When Goth's expression brings these forbidden topics into the light, it creates space for conversations that are often avoided in media, education, and politics, for example. It asks us the question, why are certain realities considered unacceptable? Who decides these boundaries and what purpose do they fucking serve? Beyond provoking thought, Goth also builds community among these who feel alienated by the status quo. It offers a refuge for people who don't fit mainstream ideals, whether because of their tastes, identities, or experiences. This sense of belonging itself is a form of resistance, creating a counterculture that values difference rather than conformity. And as we've mentioned, Goth's resistance can also extend into activism and philosophy. Activism often flows naturally from Goth's questioning of dominant cultural narratives and its embrace of marginalized perspective. In this way, Goth expression doesn't just unsettle the status quo visually, intellectually, but it influences social attitudes and fosters alternative ways of thinking and living. By making the taboo visible, Goth shakes the foundation of what society accepts as normal, encouraging both individuals and communities to shape cultural norms. One of the most common misunderstandings about Goth is the accusation of gatekeeping, of policing who counts as Goth. After all, Goth prides itself in embracing individuality and resisting to conformity. But how can insisting on certain values or expressions be seen as exclusionary? The key is understanding the difference between gatekeeping and preserving the subculture's core ethos. When I emphasize that Goth is about resisting the status quo through taboo, macabre, and rebellious expression, I'm not trying to exclude anyone arbitrarily. I'm pointing out to what makes Goth meaningful and actually a part of someone's identity. Goth isn't about checking off a list or aesthetic, musical preferences. It's about engaging authentically with a worldview that challenges mainstream norms. If somebody simply adopts the label without embracing that spirit, if they only listen to popular Goth bands but never disrupt or question the status quo in any way, it risks diluting what Goth actually stands for. And so this is not about being more Goth than anyone else. We're talking about recognizing that Goth's strength lies in resistance. Without that, Goth becomes just another fashion or trend or playlist, losing its ability to grow up thought and challenge society. Even though Goth should remain inclusive and open to diverse expressions, and I never denied that, there's no single way to resist, and Goth's many styles and philosophies reflect that. But the common thread must definitely be a commitment to questioning, challenging, and unsettling the norms that mainstream culture enforces. As we've discussed, surely Goth's resistance is multifaceted. It's in the haunting melodies that explore darkness and alienation. It's in the Gothic stories and philosophies that question life, death, meaning, and it has never excluded the striking aesthetics, makeup, fashion, and attitude that visually disrupt norms and force society to confront its own boundaries. For Goth to remain true to its roots, expression still remains an important factor, but it isn't a declaration of dissent, a way to shackle the complacency of the mainstream and open new spaces for thought and identity. Why must you still adhere to a label never meant for you? That's why a clean girl who openly listens to only mainstream Goth music without challenging or settling the status quo doesn't fully embrace Goth's rebellious spirit. You know, Goth's power lies in its ability to make the taboo visible, to unsettle, make comfortable, and to invite reflection on why certain topics are silenced. It's a subculture that thrives on questioning, disrupting, and reshaping cultural norms. But well, Goth still is an ongoing conversation between individual and society. A dark, beautiful rebellion that reminds us to look closer at what we fear and why we do. So remember, if you think there are no too many rules when it comes to Goth, I say, why do you think the core ethos and identity of being Goth seem like a rule to you anyways? So thank you for joining in on this exploration of expression as a resistance against the status quo and essay on the Goth subculture. I am Elias Sabinas, a writer, an activist, a musician, an artist, yada yada. I do so many things, and I think you should check out my other content if this type of explorations interest you, whether it be on the Goth subculture, which I've already made a video on, like the politics of the Goth subculture, but also I explore a lot of occult topics. I explore religion, I explore a lot. So yeah, thank you. I'm Elias Sabinas everywhere. I think my other accounts do vary in usernames, but my main ones are definitely just Elias Sabinas everywhere. So bye. Thank you, bye.